One of the best interviews I've ever done was with Thierry Henry. And at the time, it would have been the early 2000s, around the time Arsenal were invincible. And he was playing as well as anyone in Europe at that time. Honestly, he was just unstoppable. He'd get the ball, he'd cut in from the left, he'd bend the ball into the far post. And he did it with a swagger and an insouciance and arrogance, just incredible. We would go to clubs around England and do interviews for a series called Football Up Close, which followed Cricket Up Close. And it would be a half-hour interview format, sit down for a long time. Sometimes, if we could get them up to 20, 25 minutes. But very often the clubs were like, no, you can only have 10 minutes. But we'd have to then try and stretch that out into a 24.5 minute format with advertising breaks. But anyway, we got to Arsenal and I'd already done an interview with Dennis Bergkamp, who'd been really good. And then we went back for Thierry and I thought, he is the hottest property in football right now. He strikes me as being somebody who's so glamorous that he's not going to want to do this for very long. Arsenal were rushing things along on the day, and we just had a bad feeling about it. So we eventually set up in the room. We had the cameras set up, all good to go. And they bring Thierry in, and here he comes in, and his charisma is immediately obvious. So we sat down, and with interviews, what happens is everyone gets set up, you start putting the microphones on and feeding them up your shirt and making sure everyone's comfortable. That's the time that I always like to do a little bit of ice breaking. So I just sort of made a bit of small talk with Thierry. He'd become a father recently to a daughter, and I have two daughters. And I said to him something along the lines of, hey, congratulations on having a daughter. There's just nothing better. I've got two myself, two little ones. They're the most magical thing that's ever happened to me. And his eyes just lit up, and you could just see, it meant a lot to him. And so having done that, we established a bit of a rapport, and then we started the interview. And it was a sort of a life and times. So, you're dragging someone all the way through from childhood to more recent stories. And when I spoke to him about his childhood, it was fascinating because he talked about growing up in the suburbs of Paris. And he then into a sort of not a rant, but he went into quite a serious talk about racial tension and religious tension and how he felt in a few years' time there were going to be serious problems in France because of this, because of inner city problems and tensions that were rising. And as he was doing this, I caught my producer's eye. He was standing in the background. He was raising an eyebrow as if to say, wow, did not see this coming. And then we went on a little bit further with the interview, and Thierry was talking about his father and the influence he had. And it was, from what I could make out, it was a slightly strained relationship. And then he sort of went, he said, John, father-son relationships are really complex. And then he started giving me this lovely insight. So, I wasn't just getting, this is how I scored that goal, or this was what I did when I, transferred from that club to this club. We were getting this great interview. And honestly, it came down to the fact that I'd established trust and a rapport at the beginning of the interview. And that's something that, we should always seek to do.
And that's the empathy bit that you talked a few minutes ago.
Yeah, empathy is everything, absolutely everything.